Anna Fishbein is a playwright, producer, author, and actress. And her new play, My Stubborn Tongue, tells the story of her challenges as a Russian immigrant. Now, she's here with us to talk a little bit about that and about your childhood. You grew up in Russia.
I did. I was born there, and my family immigrated to America in the early 1980s.
So how old were you when you came? What was your first impression when you got here?
Well, when we first got here, we didn't speak a word of English, so we didn't really know anything, you know, and I tell a lot of funny stories in the show about what it was like to first arrive and not speak English and just like not know the basics.
So you tell us, pretend I'm your audience a little bit.
Well,
just a little bit. I know you're going to perform a little bit later, but just...
Yes. Well, you know, the most exciting moment is going into a grocery store, because in Russia we used to wait in line just to get the basics. And, you know, you wait in line for like milk, and you wait in line for bread, and you wait for like 3 or 4 hours for meat. In those years, it was really, really difficult to get. Yeah, so people would stand in line.
Wow.
And I remember being little and holding my grandmother's hand and, you know, and waiting and waiting and waiting till we got that piece of meat for dinner. So, but in America, we walked into a grocery store, and it was like just the cereal alone filled up like an entire aisle.
Absolutely.
And you got to choose whatever you wanted, and that was absolutely extraordinary. And I remember our relatives said to us, "We are going to take you to a very special place."
Right.
And it was the grocery store.
So that was probably the most impression that you remember as a child. I mean,
it was,
of the impression.
yeah.
That one stood out the most.
It did. It stood out a lot. You know, I mean, just everything about America was, you know, the excess was incredible.
Greatest challenge as a little girl growing up here in the States?
The greatest challenge for me was, and it's funny because I've come full circle, but when I was a little girl in Russia, I was a performer and I was an actress, and my entire young life I knew performing for thousands of people, and I sang in a choir, and I was a soloist, and then the year that I left, I was accepted to Moscow Theater.
Okay.
And so it was very, very exciting, and I was supposed to be on TV that same year, and we were supposed to travel and everything as a choir. And when I came to America, I couldn't speak a word of English, and I couldn't sing in English. I couldn't act in English. I had to learn the language first. And I used to say to my family, "I will only be happy in America when I can be on the stage." And so I'm pretty excited to be on the stage now.
So when did you get into writing?
Well, it was a very, I started writing when I was 13.
Okay.
When I first, I remember asking my mom to get me a diary, and from that moment on, you know, I just kept diary after diary after diary, year after year, and I kept trying to be better at English. Like it was never enough. I just wanted more and more and more, and so, you know, then I got a whole bunch of degrees to prove to myself that I can do it. You know?
I think you've done it.
I've done it.
A bunch of degrees. And trust me, I've been speaking English since I was 2. I get it mixed up all the time. So
yeah, you know what? It's funny. I still get it mixed up.
So when you first mastered, you know, the English language, you know,
yeah.
just that had to have been a proud moment for you. You know, just how did that feel?
It felt pretty great. I mean, there were so many, you know, there's so many little moments in your life where you feel like you've actually mastered English. Like the first one was being able to walk down the street as a child and say, "Hello, how are you?" And no one knowing that I was an immigrant.
Awesome.
And people assuming that I was an American. And so I lost my accent very quickly because I wanted to fit in and I wanted to assimilate into American culture. And then I would say that the next sort of significant moment in my life was when I was accepted into the University of Chicago.
Okay.
And I wrote that essay, you know, about being a Russian immigrant, and that was a pretty significant moment because I needed to write, and no one could help me. My parents, you know, their English wasn't good enough to help me with that, and that was all me struggling by myself.
So let's talk about the play. It's called My Stubborn Tongue.
Yes, it's called My Stubborn Tongue, and that refers to the fact that this tongue won't always move the way you want it to move.
Right.
And I talk about each one of my family members. I talk about my parents, and I talk about my grandmother, who never learned English till the time that she died. And you know, we were always translating for her.
Right.
I talk about myself as a child and what it was like to fit in and to try to fit in America. And I talk about a lot about my parents and my mom and how they struggled with language and the really, really funny stories of, you know, saying the wrong thing and getting the wrong thing. And the show goes through the process of what it was like of stumbling.
Okay.
You know, and I do different accents. I play 17 different characters.
Wow. How
Yes.
long is the performance? Like
It's an hour and a half.
Hour and a half, okay.
And so I go through our lives in America, and then I go back to Russia, and I talk about my grandmother's life, and I talk about World War II. So it's at once funny and serious.
So-
It's all things Russian.
We have to ask you about your other play, Sex in Mommyville?
Yes.
What was
Sex
that about?
in Mommyville. And that was about, I wrote that because I had been, before that, I had been working on my PhD, and then I had children, and suddenly I was no longer this intellectual, and I was no longer at the university. And, you know, instead of talking about Virginia Woolf, I had to talk about breastfeeding and what it was like, you know, to be a mom in the beginning. And all anybody said was, "How's the baby doing?" And I wanted to say, "Let's talk about Nietzsche."
Right.
And so I decided to write a play about what it's like to struggle as a new mom. And
juggling the roles.
And juggling the
brings.
roles and trying to do everything all at once, you know, trying to have a career, have sex, you know, be a good mom. It tried to fit all those things that our society tells that a mom needs to be. And then at the same time, still trying to be true to myself and my intellectual self.
You are just a bubbly personality. My God. Tell us, where can we see My Stubborn Tongue?
You can see it at the New Ohio Theater on 154 Christopher Street.
Okay.
And it is in West Village, and it's an awesome neighborhood, and it's an awesome theater. And I have an awesome director, Scott Clavin, who's helped me to bring the show to life. So.
And you're going to come back a little bit later and perform?
I will.
Okay.
I will.
All right.
I look forward to it.
Anna Fishbein, nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you.
Thank you. We'll see you in just a little bit.
Yes.